The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Cole Stangler, Paris-based journalist covering labor and politics, is here to talk about the French elections. And Amanda Chicago Lewis will also be joining us to discuss her piece in the New Republic. Legalized pot was supposed to help build black wealth in Los Angeles. It failed. Meanwhile, as Russian forces continue to pivot towards the Donbass region, Mariupol's mayor says that more than 10,000 civilians have died in the city. Even more civilians are on the brink of being without food, water, and communications. Philadelphia will reinstate its indoor mask mandate now that COVID cases are predictably rising. Expect more cities to do the same. This comes as China is experiencing its largest COVID outbreak yet. The New York Times is reporting that 6 months after leaving the White House, Jared Kushner received a $2 billion investment from a fund led by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Nothing to see there. And in a developing story, multiple people have been shot and at least 13 injured after a shooter in a gas mask and worker's vest shot up a Sunset Park subway station in Brooklyn this morning. Details are still coming out, still shaky. We'll let you know when we know more. New York's Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin was arrested this morning in a federal bribery conspiracy probe. It's alleged that he participated in a pay-to-play scheme with a Harlem real estate investor. Oklahoma's near-total abortion ban is set to be signed into law today by Republican Governor Kevin Stitt. The bill makes performing or attempting to perform an abortion punishable by up to 10 years in prison. No exception for rape or incest. And lastly, in Mexico, President Obrador has survived a recall referendum vote and will remain in power with his popularity still high. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. It is obviously still just me today. Sam. Yeah. Sam has succumbed to our bioweapon. No, just kidding. Not even succumbed. I was really joking there. Sam has COVID, and it stinks because he's been so careful about all the precautions, and he really, did a great job of avoiding it for a while. But it's hard to avoid. It's hard to avoid and keep living your life. So sending him good vibes and hope that he continues to recover. It's just gonna be me for the foreseeable future here on the show. We don't know when he's gonna be able to come back, but whenever he feels up to it, he'll be back. So get well, Sam, for sure. But let's turn to this Joe Scarborough clip, shall we? Huh? In brighter news. Yeah, right, exactly. Joe Scarborough has a message for the, quote, white woke voters in Washington, D.C. This graphic has been making the rounds this morning because of how ridiculous it is. Here is his idea of how the Democrats need to approach the midterms in terms of strategy.
And Rev, I want to talk to you about a real blind spot
that a lot of Democrats in the Beltway in D.C. have that you don't, and you've been warning about. But let's just say it right here, and let me say it slowly for my Democratic friends in Washington, D.C. Black voters are more conservative than you are. White woke leaders in Washington, D.C. Hispanic voters are more conservative than you are. White woke leaders in Washington, D.C. Asian American voters are more conservative than you are. White woke voters in Washington, D.C. And they're more conservative on crime. They're more conservative on education. They're more conservative on, quote, these woke issues. Get off of Twitter. I'm telling you. And Rev.
All right, here's the graphic here. Midterm issues for Democrats. I wonder if Joe came up with it himself. Woke up as opposed to wake up. Get it? Do you guys get it? It's complicated, I know. Censoring of conservative voices on social media needs to be a midterm issue for Democrats. College campuses becoming liberal echo chambers. The push to be politically correct and canceling historical figures. Did Dave Rubin come up with this? Just keep going.
If you look at Biden, Biden runs against 15 progressives. Biden's the only moderate. Biden wins. We've said it time and again. Eric Adams.
Sorry, Biden was the only moderate in the field. I mean, I would even generously, there was 2 non-moderates if you want to include Elizabeth Warren, which
right.
I have my problems with Elizabeth Warren, but yeah, I mean, insane.
Adams runs as a conservative.
Oh, and here's some more. Furtherance of this graph here, midterm issues for Democrats, just to read this out. DAs in major cities going soft on crime.
Okay.
Bail reform in New York. Crime spike in San Francisco. Again, like crime is spiking absolutely everywhere. 2020, which is not to say it's like it's not a partisan issue. It's because there's a pandemic where people are experiencing
increasingly desperate.
Extremely amount of desperation. In 2020, support for defund the police haunting Democrats.
There we go.
2022.
Yeah, even though there's no evidence to that effect. And even though we showed you last week on the show how the expiration of the child tax credit has essentially swung a bunch of voters. It doesn't see, you can't prove exact correlation, but there seems to be exact causation rather. There seems to be a hell of a lot of correlation for people whose child tax credit expired and people who are becoming more disenchanted with the Biden administration. But apparently that's defund the police.
Yeah, and the thing to know about that and why it's not emphasized here is that everybody in the Morning Joe studio likes that those kids are experiencing poverty. They want it that way.
Right. All right, keep going. And I also just want to point out Biden's win. Of course, they're treating that as a referendum on everybody wants centrist policies. He won because Trump was such a disaster and the pandemic was such a disaster that people wanted anything normal. And that's why Biden was able to be elected. I can't prove it. It's a counterfactual. But if COVID hadn't happened, I don't think Biden could have defeated Trump. That's my opinion. But keep going.
He wins Brooklyn. He wins the Bronx. He wins Staten Island. Surprise. He wins Queens as a conservative, as a centrist Democrat. Can you please? I know you've done it a lot.
No.
Can you explain to white woke leaders? Can you explain to them that they're not only losing white dudes in the upper Midwest?
Who does he mean when he says white woke leaders?
He means you and me on Twitter.
Really? I mean, are we in Morning Joe's head like that? I'm going to start making.
I mean, stay tuned. There's going to be a graphic of us coming up soon.
They're losing people of color.
They're losing people of color because they really don't get the people of color's life. If you are living in a city, in a neighborhood that is inundated with crime, and you act like that is not an issue, you've already lost me. That is an issue. Yes, we must deal with policing. I've been out front of that. But you cannot ignore when 12-year-old kids who somebody's niece and neighbor is killed, and you act like that's a non-issue because you're too elitist to live on the ground.
Yeah, nobody's doing that.
That's nobody. Yeah. This is like a modern version of hippie bashing, where it's like, look at these white kids who want to defund the police. I mean, they ignore the tons of non-white activists who are participating in that, but they're saying white woke kids in DC. I mean, like I don't know who they're talking about, because usually this is the criticism that's leveled at the squad, but you can't that they're most people, if not all of the members of the
Yeah,
squad.
talking about Katie Porter.
Yeah, just Katie Porter. Right. Katie Porter is causing wreaking havoc, and it's hard for them to make that claim with her specifically if they wanted to, because she's in a purple district herself, and yet she's still vocal about a lot of the issues that the squad is vocal about. So it's just like ridiculous. The concept that the idea that people are voting based on woke culture and cancellations. I mean, can we put that graphic up again just really quickly? The first one that he put up there. Crime and cancellations. That's what's okay. Here we go. Censoring of conservative voices on social media. College campuses becoming liberal echo chambers. The push to be politically correct. Canceling historical figures. This is
also how is the third bullet point any different from the first two? Like, they're just running out of things to put in bullet points.
Yeah, I mean,
the
like,
push to be politically correct. That's implied under censoring of conservative voices on social media and college campuses becoming liberal echo chambers.
The echo chamber and the elites here are that's you. You're just reading Barry Weiss's Substack and then pretending that's a broad United States electoral issue.
A former Republican congressman and his wife, who is the daughter of a leading sort of foreign policy voice, basically the Democrat Henry Kissinger. Okay.
I mean, just I hope instead of Medicare for all, instead of a Green New Deal, I hope all Democrats in this upcoming election cycle make sure to point out that college campuses are getting too liberal. That'll change the tide for Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to just see how a leftist, I mean, he's not a white guy, but a leftist talks about these sorts of crime issues. We had Paul Prescott on, who's a Democrat for state senate in Pennsylvania, on Left Reckoning, and I would go check out his, because yes, it is an issue where rising violence, like people in communities do want that addressed. And if the right way to address that is more cops, or if it's investment elsewhere and different types of public safety stuff. But I would check out that for somebody who's actually running in a political campaign and addressing these things head on and not avoiding them, like or just acting like he doesn't care, as the caricature is here with Scarborough.
Yep. And what did we say about this whole defund thing, right? I mentioned the thing about it, what's going to hurt Democrats most in the midterms is the fact that they lost on Build Back Better and they haven't passed any substantial legislation. What most people vote on is like strength and victories and good policy, yes, to an extent. But Democrats haven't been able to pass anything substantial. And that's because most of the Democratic legislators listened to the moderates and said, yeah, we'll be able to appease Joe Manchin. We just need a win now on infrastructure. And then you turn and you see the polling about the child tax credit expiring and how that's materially affected people's lives. And in fact, what do you know? The squad was correct. It had the opposite effect. People are turning away from the Democratic Party because there wasn't, at least are less enthused about them going into the midterms, because one, there wasn't a win, and two, something tangible that was provided for them was taken from them. And so they're going to have a bit of resentment about that. That's actually understanding people's motivations and understanding what affects people materially, as opposed to like college campus free speech. Talk about a warped perception of what elitism actually is.
The child poverty thing is a crime, and Democrats deserve to lose in a vacuum for that. It's an absolute crime that throwing that many kids back into poverty, just because I guess Joe Manchin and the rest of the vampires in that party.
Yep. All right, folks, we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be joined by Cole Stangler, Paris-based journalist, on the French elections from over the weekend. We'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by Cole Stangler, Paris-based journalist covering labor and politics. Cole, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, yeah, of course. The results of this round of elections in France. What are some of the major takeaways that you have as a journalist on the ground covering this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to take away. Maybe starting with one, perhaps of more interest to your viewers is that the left outperformed expectations pretty substantially. France is in a very particular political and media climate these days that's really dominated by the right, in which the main opposition that's sort of put forth by the press, by much of the mainstream press, and really by much of the political establishment for a variety of reasons, is the opposition between the centrist, center-right Macron, the establishment, and then the far right, really toxic xenophobia represented by Marine Le Pen, who's the more mainstream vision of that, and then Éric Zemmour, who's a polemicist who got lower than 10% in the presidential election. In any case, so despite this sort of political media climate, the left did fairly well with Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who got 22% of the vote, way overperforming polls, amassing a really interesting broad coalition that in many ways, despite the differences, is similar to the Bernie Sanders Corbyn coalition, composed of working class voters, left-leaning voters in cities that are more middle class, and then young people, big pillar of Mélenchon support. So I think that's one thing that if you want to kind of look at, one of the more positive takeaways from this election is certainly the fact that Mélenchon came very, very close to making it to the second round, about a percentage point or so behind Le Pen, who was at 23%, Macron at 28%. So now, we have this, this matchup between Macron and Le Pen. Maybe before going to that, just another quick takeaway here. One of the issues that prevented Mélenchon from getting to the second round is the division on the left, which is something that unfortunately I've covered a lot and know a lot about it at this point. Is over the last 5 years, the inability of left-wing parties for a variety of reasons to really work together, and in this case, the center-left parties deciding that they wanted to have their own candidates for particular reasons having to do with their own specific parties, so in particular the Communist Party, the Greens. And ultimately, that was the real difference maker here for Mélenchon. If the Communists had supported Mélenchon as in 2017, then he would be in the second round. So anyways, strong performance in the left-wing division, and now we're faced with this situation that a lot of people are dreading between Macron and Le Pen. I think people should be prepared for a surprise at this point. Macron is still leading in the polls, but he's seen his lead really dwindle, over the last few weeks as attention has moved away from the war in Ukraine. And France is in a really dangerous place right now heading into the second round.
Yeah. I later in the program, we're probably going to talk about a U.S.-based journalist here who once said that Trump had no chance of winning the Republican primary, now saying that Le Pen has no chance of winning in the final round here, which is crazy. I want to get to the more doom and gloom stuff in a bit, but I did want to touch on Mélenchon and his policy positions. He supports a hike in the minimum wage, lowering the retirement age, and actual climate policy as opposed to the non-policy of Macron. And his overperformance, like he's run before, and he didn't have the support of the Communist Party, as you say, or the Greens. There wasn't the coalescence behind him this time around, yet he still overperformed. What did he do differently in your estimation?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, this is sometimes used as a critique against him, but I think we should acknowledge it to some extent. Clearly, he was seen as what the French call le vote utile, so sort of the strategic, the useful vote is a literal translation, sort of the strategic, tactical vote for the left. And he really surged in the end of the campaign because people who might not have been terribly sympathetic to him before saw the matchup that was sort of, the risk of this Macron-Le Pen matchup, and decided to vote for Mélenchon because they saw him as the most viable left-wing contender. So he picked up some support, clearly, I think, from people who wanted to have the left in the second round, who might not have been all on board with all of his policies. And that's clearly visible when you look at his support in some of the larger cities where he did much better than in 2017. He almost won Paris, which is remarkable when you think about who lives here in the city today. He won Toulouse, he won Marseille, he won Nantes. Picking up support from these more, middle class, left-leaning voters who saw, okay, you know what, he's the only viable candidate, I'll support him. But of course, to get to that position, you need to have a real solid base to begin with. And Mélenchon did have a significant base of support from, I think one important element, without exaggerating it too much, is that, we have this broad trend in the West of left-wing parties, nominally left-wing parties in some cases, losing support from working class voters. We see it in the US, we see it in the UK, Thomas Piketty's research has looked into this as well. And we of course see it in France. Mélenchon does not capture all of working class support, but he was able to sort of conserve a significant chunk of support among working class voters. If you look at the exit polls, about 25% voted for Mélenchon, so higher than his overall total. So he had this base of working class support through his program, talking about repealing Macron's repeal of the wealth tax, of putting back into place this wealth tax that Macron repealed, hiking the minimum wage, investing massively in public services. These sort of bread and butter economic proposals, I think played a role in having this base. And he also is very popular among young voters, in part, again, because of the climate issues that he really embraced without the sort of mealy-mouthed liberalism that we hear from the Socialist Party. So a really bold platform. And at the end of the campaign, he surged because he was seen as the one real viable contender. Maybe one last element I'll add, which is, I think, important, that doesn't really get talked about perhaps as much as it should here in France, at least, is that, as I was mentioning earlier, France has this very toxic sort of political media moment that we're living right now, where the far right sort of culture wars are dominating public debate, constant hand-wringing over the place of Islam in France,
right.
About French national identity, about secularism, about we've had, unfortunately, this whole debate in France about wokisme, which is literally wokeness, so the place of sort of these woke ideas. And Macron's government has fueled these wars. In any case, Mélenchon, I think, was really the only candidate on the left with a chance of winning who said, you know what, here's who defended an alternate vision of sort of what French, identity is today, which is that it's a multicultural nation built of immigrants, people who are, descendant of immigrants. Yes, there are Muslims. Yes, there are Jewish people. And this sounds so simple to say, but in the French context today, where we are at sort of politically and media-wise, I think it meant a lot. And that, I think, appealed to a lot of voters in ways that I think the French mainstream press fails to understand, especially if you look at Mélenchon's support in the banlieue, which are suburbs of big cities that are heavily populated by immigrants and people that are descendant of immigrants. And look at Mélenchon's scores were fantastic. And if you look at the suburbs of Paris, like off the charts. So I think all this played into his success.
Right. And unfortunately, he did not advance to the second round. So now we have an Islamophobic candidate and an Islamophobic incumbent who essentially, at the very least, right? I mean, and you can, if my characterization is unfair, let me know. But it seems like he has, Macron has essentially ceded that Islamophobia is necessary for him to have electoral success, has said, I think his interior minister said that Le Pen was soft on immigration, etc. Like he's pivoted to embracing some of this racist rhetoric, and so Le Pen's obviously a fascist, but he has I guess legitimized a lot of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a variety of things that we can look at to sort of illustrate that point. One is, we saw a law that they passed, supported by the government, that was initially called the Law Against Islamic Separatism, which they then renamed the law to, I think, Reinforce Republican Principles was the final title of it. This law was designed to supposedly crack down on the problem of radical Islam in certain parts in France, explicitly linking it to jihadism and terrorism. And it should be pointed out there have been a string of terrorist attacks in France that have sort of made this a real issue. Maybe it's not the most important issue in France, but there is this issue. And in particular of sort of homegrown jihadism, and that is a problem in France. Now, the issue with Macron's law is that a lot of human rights organizations criticized it for going too far, sort of linking even conservative forms of Islam to jihadism. You also had the government outlawing the primary coalition, the primary organization called the Collective Against Islamophobia. The government outlawed it. And so you had this real conflation of all these issues between, jihadism, Muslim separatism, conservative Islam, groups that are fighting Islamophobia, because supposedly in the sort of official line from the government and the interior minister you mentioned, talking about Islamophobia as a concept is seen as a way of legitimizing, the sort of Islamic separatist rhetoric. That's the line from the government. So there is this law against Islamic separatism. We've seen the law against the reforms to the immigration system, essentially making it easier to deport undocumented immigrants. We've seen hardline policies in Calais, which is in the north of France, where perhaps people have seen these images, horrific images of people living in tents, and in some cases people dying trying to cross the English Channel going to the UK. You have people, essentially homeless people, living in tents in Calais, and the government has repeatedly sent people in to tear up these tents and making public displays of them, and with the interior minister really celebrating this Darmanin. So you have all that. You also have on this question of law and order. Again, Macron has really tried to position himself as sort of a law and order candidate, and painted his government as a real defender of law and order. We saw a particular law on national security that, in addition to enhancing government surveillance, featured a measure that fortunately was struck down by France's Constitutional Council, which is the rough equivalent to the Supreme Court. But this measure in particular that was defended repeatedly by Macron and Darmanin and his government would have made it illegal, criminalized the filming of police officers while they're in duty, if the intent was to harm the officers, and people would have been subjected to fines of tens of thousands of euros. The government defended that proposal, despite a lot of people saying, I think with good reason, that is a violation of sort of basic liberal principles.
I mean, how is intent measured except to use to crack down, right?
Unfortunately, the country's Constitutional Council struck it down. But I mean, and this gets into another issue, which is that Macron was often painted by much of the foreign press, not everybody, but he's often painted as a sort of liberal, right? A sort of classic liberal. And I think there's a fair argument to be made that when you look at a certain number of these policies, immigration and security, there's not a whole lot that's very liberal about this, especially when you're talking about, that national security law. I'm a journalist. The idea is that it's hurting my profession to be able to I can't take photos of police brutality. You're cracking down on the press, and so fortunately, journalists unions were helped fight fight this law and helped, lead protests against it. But I think there's a strong case to be made that, Macron is not really a liberal. He's has liberal economic policies in many respects, in the sort of classically liberal sense. But when it comes to law and order, he has a very sort of conservative bent. I don't want to be careful about saying authoritarian because some people say that, but certainly very conservative leaning bent on these sort of law and order security policies.
So in this second round, that means that, as you characterize it, and I think it's a fair characterization, based on my understanding, you have a center-right, neoliberal, free market, anti-labor, pro-cop incumbent.
Yeah.
In a time where there's a lot of anxiety globally and in France, where change might be called for, versus Marine Le Pen, who now I want to get into a little bit, because it seems like she's, she was rightly portrayed, I think, last time around when she did lose, as a far right candidate. She has fascist tendencies. She comes from a long line of this. Her father was involved in politics before her, also a right winger. And it seems like she's tweaked her rhetoric a little bit to be less explicit about her racism and a few more dog whistles. And you can tell me if that's accurate or not. But that, I don't know, is that enough to take her over the finish line to appeal to people if she's being a little bit less explicit about her right-wing views?
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen in the campaign, the real anti-immigrant stuff, anti-Islam stuff is all in the program. I think she even more recently said that she wants now to ban the Islamic headscarf in public, so not just schools, which is already the case for high schools. I think middle schools to high schools, excuse me. She wants to ban the Islamic headscarf outright in public. So that stuff's still there. It's in her program. You can read her program. She wants to have a referendum on changing rules for basically limiting the ability of foreigners to access benefits through the French welfare system. Affecting millions of people, some of whom are also coming from EU countries. So this is all in her program, but it is true that over the last few weeks in the campaign, she's avoided some of the more inflammatory, explicitly racist rhetoric that her party has been known for in the past. And one of the big reasons for this is that she had the benefit of having someone run even to the right of her, which was Zemmour, who really helped set the tone for the debate. And so Le Pen was able to sort of play off Zemmour by saying, you know what, he's a little too divisive. He's very extreme. He wants to deport all the undocumented immigrants right away, immediately send them on planes immediately. He wants to ban people from having non-French names for their babies. That was something that Zemmour said. And so Le Pen could say, I'm sorry, I know this is so dark.
No, it's disturbing how prevalent all of this is.
And so Le Pen, would say, well, this is too extreme. Listen, we do have a problem with immigration, but we need to be able to unite people. And so she was able to play off Zemmour. And what happened over the last few weeks is that she really turned her attention to what's called in French the pouvoir d'achat, which is literally purchasing power, but sort of cost of living and broadly kind of economic issues. And what's interesting is if you look at even her her program, everyone in France gets these leaflets that are sent out to them ahead of the election of programs of every candidate running for office. If you open Le Pen's program, the first two issues that are mentioned in her program are what I just said, pouvoir d'achat, cost of living, and public services. So defending the French, the French, I'm not sure if it's phrased exactly public services, but it's the French social model she wants to defend. Of course, there's a racist, xenophobic tone to that because it's for French people, but nevertheless, she didn't talk about immigration. Those first two policy planks. And on the campaign trail, she's talked a lot about the cost of living, She wants to lower taxes, what she calls social charges. So the basic social security contributions, they're too high. So she doesn't want to raise the minimum wage, but she wants to lower taxes, and which would translate into wage hikes for people, while also crippling the public sector. But that's another issue. She wants to defend public services, and that rhetoric, I think, appeals at a moment in which we've seen the current government that has not given public services the amount of funding that they need to properly function. You look at the hospital system, you look at the education system. People have been complaining about this for years, and so Le Pen, is able to sort of address her, make a shift in discourse that I think is paying off. And she also, frankly, benefited from the fact that Macron wasn't really campaigning at all for the last few weeks. He was, there was obviously the war in Ukraine, and Macron was preoccupied with that. But in spite of that, there's a lot of resentment, the fact that he didn't want to, neglected to participate, declined to participate in a debate before the first round. And so there's really a sense that he's, the sort of aloof, arrogant president. And in some ways, it sort of goes beyond politics. While Le Pen is traversing the country, going to small towns and saying, I'm listening to you. Look at our, president. He doesn't even want to debate me. And that stuff, I think clearly has broadened her appeal. At the same time, let's not forget. I mean, she was one percentage point ahead of Mélenchon, and if you just add the French Communist Party behind Mélenchon, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But here we are, and it's also a testament to the anti-Macron sentiment that she's so close right now. It's would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. She's about 4 or 5 points, depends on which polls you look at, but behind Macron with a chance at actually winning the presidency, which is remarkable.
I mean, it's not to compare too much to the United States, but like there are echoes of what we saw with Hillary versus Trump. Somebody who feels like the cachet of being on the international stage, trying to make headlines for himself, frankly, attempting to broker peace unsuccessfully with Russia and Ukraine, and then somebody who's Le Pen is seemingly co-opting some of this populist rhetoric. I guess my question to you is, what is the sincerity about her commitment to some of these changes? Because it could be a way to. It doesn't seem like it is sincere. It could just be a way to achieve electoral success. But I'm curious about your take on that.
I don't know. I mean, that's, I think it's a hard question to answer, because in some ways, I don't really know if she's sincere or not. I think she wants to get elected. But I think also to be careful about saying that, this is not a left-wing economic program. You look at Le Pen, she's against raising the minimum wage. She wants to raise people's pay by decreasing Social Security contributions, which is an old right-wing proposal in France. That has a negative effect on all the public services because you're defunding them. It's like, I think Republicans talk about this when they talk about, we want to, boost take-home pay, right? They don't want to raise the minimum wage. They want to, cut contributions to Social Security. At least that's a rhetoric that we've heard in the past in the U.S. She doesn't, want a massive investment to fight climate change. She wants to get rid of windmills because they're annoying to farmers and ugly to look at. She doesn't, it's not really there aren't really, planks of her economic program that are that recognizable, to be honest. I think it's really, coasting on this anti-Macron feeling. And, the frightening thing is, I mean, when you think about the second round that's coming up, and maybe this is different. Well, in some ways mirrors the what we saw in the U.S. in 2016. I think the risk is less, and I think I'm already seeing, the sort of discourse among a certain liberal-leaning Macron-supporting pundits on the internet and articles they're writing, saying that the danger here is the sort of red-brown alliance of, we're going to see all these left-wing voters that are going to buy into Le Pen's program, and they just want to topple Macron, and they're going to vote for Le Pen. That is not so much of a risk, in my opinion. The bigger risk is that these left-wing voters, young people, working class people, people that care about the environment, people that care about racial justice, although it would never be called that in France for a lot of reasons. People that are attached to anti-racism, they don't feel compelled to go and vote for Macron. Some portion of them don't feel compelled to go and vote for Macron because what they've seen over the last 5 years, and it's sort of fresh in my mind because I've been talking to these people for a piece that I'm working on right now. But that's what scares me when you think about the potential election outcome. It's not that you're going to have people voting for Le Pen. It's more that people are sort of sick of having to pick the least worst of options, and in particular Macron, because they see him as equivalent to Le Pen.
Well, and in terms of just if there's enough people that stay home, and there are enough people who peel off from Zemmour, right? The even further right great replacement theory candidate who got around 7%, if I'm not mistaken. That's enough to put her over the edge, is it not?
Yeah, I mean that's the big question. I think that's why the left-wing electorate is going to be huge here, because Le Pen presumably will get that support from the far right, the sort of like mainstream right, which I even hesitate to say mainstream right because they've adopted so much radical right discourse over the last few years. Some of them are saying they're not even sure if they're going to vote for Macron, although today former President Sarkozy said that he would be supporting Macron. But yeah, Macron is going to need this left-wing electorate, or at least left-leaning electorate. And I think a lot of and this is in a way, I just want to be clear here, I'm not trying to justify or encourage people to not vote. That's not what I'm saying. But if you want to understand sort of how Le Pen could win, this is the path. It's that these people don't feel compelled to vote. And there's a lot of them, and they also fit different categories. You have working class people that are hit by these economic reforms, that can't get unemployment insurance anymore, unemployment benefits, because Macron changed the rules. I was just talking to someone and they said they can't get these benefits because of the rule change. And Macron, rolled back taxes on the super rich, but she's still paying taxes. Like, does that make you want to vote for them? There's that. There's, Black and immigrants, Black people, people of color and immigrants in France that feel disgusted by this rhetoric. There's like a big base of yellow vest resentment. And it's not these people are going to vote for Le Pen. I'm repeating myself. It's that I'm not sure these people are necessarily going to show up. And so what they're waiting for, what some people are waiting for, I think some of them could be compelled, is that, if Macron could make some sort of gesture in their direction, some acknowledgement of the, the situation that we're in today. And it hasn't happened yet. A lot of people are skeptical it's going to happen over the last 2 weeks. And this gets back into sort of his image of arrogance, of aloofness, of not wanting to admit when he's wrong.
Or seemingly, sorry to interrupt you, an unwillingness to tack left at all, but a very open willingness to tack right on a lot of issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And today, I think, this week we've seen he seemingly suggested that maybe he's he's open to not raising the retirement age. So that was one of his big, really fascinating, just political strategy, if I can say so, that before a campaigning on raising the retirement age. So he's now saying, well, maybe, we could maybe reconsider instead of 65, maybe 64, maybe we can postpone it a little bit. So there's some maybe movement on that issue, but I think people are waiting for something a bit more. And I'm not really sure if we're going to get it because, Macron's political strategy has really hinged around taking over the mainstream right and appealing to these right-wing voters. And I'm not so sure that he's politically able to sort of make a move in the opposite direction. Really at this point. I mean, if you look at his cabinet, surrounded by people from the right, his interior minister, who was part of a far right youth group, both of his prime ministers come from the right. His education minister is a right-wing culture warrior. At this point, he's so locked into this that I'm not sure he's able to pivot leftward. But we'll see. And in the meantime, the polls are just getting polls are tightening.
It's really terrifying, but I really appreciate your time today. Cole Stangler, Paris-based journalist covering labor and politics. Where can people find more of your work to read about this? And the final round is April 24th, right?
I'm not sure the exact. It's in Sunday from 2 weeks from now. I've been
okay. Yeah.
So it's not next. It's not this coming Sunday. It's the following Sunday. Will be the second round, and you can find my work at colestangler.com, and hopefully doing some more election coverage here as the well, I am doing more election coverage here as the next couple of weeks go on.
All right. Well, really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by Amanda Chicago Lewis on her piece about how legalized cannabis was supposed to help build Black wealth, and it has not done so specifically in California. We'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined right now by Amanda Chicago Lewis, whose piece in the New Republic, Legalized Pot, was supposed to help build Black wealth in Los Angeles. It failed. It's available now for everybody to read. It's excellent. Amanda, thank you so much for being here today.
Great to be here. Thanks for the kind words.
Of course. And so let's talk about your piece. You know, it's not just Los Angeles that a lot of these programs are being implemented. I guess before we get into the specific person, Keith, who you center your story around, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these supposed racial justice initiatives in pot legalization around the country, because we have some of it in New York, some of it in other states, in Massachusetts, where it's still rolling out here in New York, but it hasn't panned out in the way that the legislation said it was designed to do. So can you talk a little bit about that, and just some examples from around the country?
Yeah, so these quote-unquote social equity programs that broadly attempt to atone for the racial disparities of the war on drugs through the legalization of cannabis have been, I would say, like all the rage the last 5 or 6 years, most of the places that are legalizing. So we see them in California, we see them in Massachusetts. In Michigan, obviously it's having a huge influence on how New Jersey and New York are legalizing. It's happening in Virginia, it's happening in Arizona, it's happening in Connecticut. One of the people I spoke to for this story said, like, essentially you can't legalize without thinking about equity right now. And of course, after George Floyd's murder, this all accelerated, right? The sort of move on the part of politicians, but also businesses to signal that they care about racial equity. Do they actually care about racial equity? Often not. So one of the people who I spoke to so cannabis legalization is an incredibly local issue, right? In order to legally sell or grow cannabis, wherever you are, you need a license from either the state or your city or county, your municipality. So wherever legalization has occurred, it's ended up being this kind of often political favor-driven process of giving out these licenses. Who gets to sell weed, right? And to be clear, having a license is not a ticket to wealth. There's sort of this illusion that weed is really lucrative. And it is if you're breaking the law. If you are selling legal weed, it is not that lucrative. So there's sort of been these like, we are going to offer generational wealth to mostly Black and brown people, but we can't explicitly say that because of affirmative action case law through these social equity programs by giving people licenses or offering a certain limited number of licenses to so-called equity applicants. In practice, what this has actually looked like is promises of wealth and far more people losing money in the pursuit of social equity licenses than are actually making money with successful businesses.
So social equity licenses are like the prerequisite essentially for a Black or brown business to start selling weed. But I mean, like, if you don't have the capital to actually start your business, like most of these growing chains like Curaleaf and other cannabis businesses in the country have, how do you even really get started? Because you can't get a loan in most places because it's not legal on a federal level.
Exactly. So in addition to the fact that
not in most places, right? You can't get a loan at all. Exactly.
So first of all, there's limited numbers of licenses. So maybe you have 1,000 people competing for 100 licenses. So 900 of those people are spending all this money maybe on, you have to have a property in place before you can apply for the license, potentially. You have to have really elaborate like zoning clearance, security plans. You have to get all of this stuff set up that costs all of this money before you can even be considered to get the license. Then when you have the license, not only are you competing against these giant chains with lots of money, but you're also competing against the illicit market. So it's kind of a bait and switch situation. Where do they get the money? A lot of people are describing predatory loans from whether it's investors who think generally the social equity licenses cost less to get than other licenses, right? Because the principle behind the thing means that they're like, oh, we'll make it more accessible. We'll make it easier for you to get this license. But it ends up being more expensive than, the people who write the rules think it's going to be often. So maybe you're borrowing money from another cannabis company, but then they set up these elaborate contracts where you can only sell the other company's weed. Or if you ever decide to sell your business, you have to sell to that bigger company. I had a lawyer in Los Angeles who was sort of reviewing several of these contracts that social equity applicants signed with investors in bigger companies and said it was some of the most predatory deals he had ever seen. And then also that's even people like, is the deal making it so that they actually are going to allow an equity applicant to run the business? A lot of times someone puts their name down to say, they're the owner on paper, but in fact, behind the scenes, they're getting $35,000 a year to do nothing, not be involved with the business at all. And on paper, it says that they own the business, but in fact, they have nothing to do with the business.
So essentially, if you wanted to be an actually independent Black cannabis business owner, you would have to have a ton of capital that you get yourself, basically, that you already have acquired, which means that I don't know how that's necessarily promoting generational wealth in that way, because you're unable to get a loan. Or you have to sign away your rights to a larger corporation, or you have to go to a loan shark. So these are the options, because it doesn't appear like any of these social equity or racial justice programs within cannabis legalization offer grant programs, which would solve some of this, because then you would be able to get off the ground, right?
So there are so many programs that there are so many different things happening, that each place has its own thing. In Oakland, they have tried grants from the local government. However, when people were not able to pay back those grants because it's an extremely competitive market over there, and they're competing with the illicit market. There's been a lot of robberies and other crime against cannabis businesses, particularly in the Bay Area, particularly in the last couple of years.
They're all you can only pay with cash because again, you can't pay with credit because of
easy
it's
target
legal on the federal level. Yeah.
So Oakland offered grants to social equity applicants. When they weren't able to pay them back, they sent collections after those people.
Oh, all right, this makes me very mad. And you had the statistic in your piece in terms of just like this fool's gold of promoting generational wealth. Black families since the Emancipation Proclamation have gone from controlling 0.5% of the nation's wealth to less than 2% during that entire period. And like is that, I mean, obviously there's something wrong there, but that was one of the statistics that one of the most jarring statistics I've read in a while.
I mean, listen, I've been covering the cannabis industry in a lot of detail and legalization for like 9 years now. Researching this piece, which, took maybe like 9 months to a year, and also, is something I've been following for several years. Looking into the historical parallels, this is nothing new. This is exactly what the United States has been doing, particularly around promising property ownership, promoting business ownership, particularly among Black people, like since the Emancipation Proclamation. Before that, but like in terms of, 40 acres and a mule, just kidding, we're not actually giving you that, right? Like there's been so many examples. I mean, in my piece, I get into one of the biggest historical parallels, which is Nixon's Black capitalism program, which is very similar to how social equity is playing out in terms of what was promised, the sort of political and business motivated social justice sheen that's being put on something when in fact behind the scenes, like, was it ever intended to really work? And why is it not working? And what are all the loopholes that businesses in particular are able to exploit, working around even the best intentioned governments?
I mean, it's just it seems like a really deliberate way to work around reparations, right? I mean, it's just we don't actually we want to control any Black wealth that's being created, and it's all got to be on our terms. And if it doesn't really work out, somebody's going to get rich anyway. And that's you have to have success within the narrow confines of like our capitalist expectations, and we're going to totally avoid and hide the ball on what would actually change things and repair some of this, which that's reparations.
Right. And then also, I mean, the cynical view is that it's been an intentional distraction to delay the new entrants to cannabis markets, because many of the folks that were licensed when only medical was legal in various places are predominantly well-capitalized white men. This is what we see in Illinois, in California, and so in Massachusetts. And so, I had someone in the cannabis industry after they read the story was telling me, like, yeah, this was like deliberately, those people got priority on licensing, which is what we're seeing right now in New Jersey. The folks who have medical licenses are getting early access to the recreational market, but they were licensed under a system that did not consider social justice or anything like this. And in the meantime, there's this slow motion equity process, which is filled with lawsuits and arguments and infighting. And meanwhile, all the medical folks have access to the market. Is it easy money for them? No, not necessarily, because having a license is not a ticket to wealth. You're still competing with the illicit market, and it's still very expensive to run a legal weed business. But it doesn't make it any easier for the social equity folks, especially, in Illinois, we still don't have any social equity businesses and they legalized like 3 or 4 years ago. There've been so many rounds of lawsuits and arguments, and the people who were supposedly going to be the social equity licensees, all this sort of, there were a lot of front people. There were a lot of, it's actually this other company and they use this other person as a front. So it's a very messy business.
Yeah, I mean, and it's depressing because this was a really this was an opportunity for repair, and it just was not taken seriously or in any way. I mean, and probably it's just that they actually didn't really want to repair it, honestly. Maybe that's the reality here. But before I let you go, I didn't want to move past the story of the person you center a lot of your piece on, Kika Keith. Do you mind telling her story a bit?
Yeah. So Kika Keith, heard these promises about generational wealth in 2017 when, then president of city council in Los Angeles, Black guy named Herb Wesson, was, speaking in predominantly Black neighborhoods, talking about how legal weed was going to, help the community and bring money into the community. She is an entrepreneur. She had previously started a company making a raw green beverage out of chlorophyll, with chlorophyll that was sold in Whole Foods. And she was like, I love this. I'm going to do this. And she spent 4 years trying to open that business, but also fighting the city and pushing to actually get what was promised to happen the entire way. The city did not enforce rules that it had put out there. The city kept delaying the program, and she just sort of took it upon herself to, become a leader in that community. And she ended up being part of a group that sued the city and forced them to allow more licenses after there was a licensing round that was found in a city audit to be pretty corrupt. I mean, like a lot of stuff going on that's really not okay. And, it's also, there's just no, I think it's the big takeaway from all of this, because it gets very complicated. Weed policy is a lot more complex than, you might think. The big takeaway is just because a business or a politician is promising some kind of racial justice initiative doesn't mean that they are actually intending for that to work. And it's often a very surface level promise.
Yep. Well, people, I don't want to give away everything in the piece because it's really well done. Legalized pot was supposed to help build Black wealth in Los Angeles. It failed. You can read that in the New Republic. Amanda Chicago Lewis, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, folks, with that, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program. But first, Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, we did a think tank tomorrow. We're going to be talking to Kurt Hackbarth about Mexican politics. So check that out.
Nice.
Patreon.com/leftreckoning.
I want to check that out because I'm curious about, like a true leftist take on the results from yesterday.
Yeah, Kurt, we had him on Left Reckoning before, so it'll be interesting to catch up with him.
Yep. All right, I'll be checking that out. Nomi will be joining us in the fun half, but
internet permitting, it looks like.
Oh, really? Oh, you just messaged that to me.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see. Maybe she will be, but regardless, check out the Nomiki show on YouTube, on Rockfin, Twitch, etc. I believe all those good places. We'll be taking your calls, reading your IMs. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomiki.
You did it.
On half.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
On half. Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is this?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm going to go throw up.
Libertarians. They're so stupid, though. Common sense says, of course.
gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Mac.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say. 857-210-3501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes to satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
We are back. We are back. And I am still eating my Nutri-Grain bar. That's kind of how it works. Have to always be eating as the fun half starts. Nomi, what's happening on your show?
Great question. No, I'm kidding. I was like, who's on my show this week? You guys probably caught me on a hot mic moment. Tonight we are doing a Rockfin. We have a special show starting at 8 p.m. We're on all the platforms on Tuesday Night Live. TNS Live, we do like long interviews. And David Dayen's going to join us. I know he's a regular on the Majority Report.
Nice.
So he's going to talk about pretty much like all of his latest reporting for the hour. It's gonna be fun. And then tomorrow we have Solidarity Wednesday with Ben Dixon, our friend over there. And you can check us out at 8 p.m. also there. And I'm gonna be on his morning show in the morning. That's how we do it. Like Wednesday, I wake up super early, go on his show, and
he does his show early, right? Like what time?
Yeah. I think it starts at 9. Actually, it's not that early.
Oh.
It just feels early because, you know.
Yeah, I get it.
I remember in the old days, I used to do all these morning shows. And then one day I just woke up and I was like, why am I doing these morning shows? If you get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, they pick you up at like 3:30. You're like in here. And then they have an early morning show, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I just woke up one day and said, I don't have to do that.
I remember one time, like, I've never done a cable news hit like that, but one time I did Rising back when they were doing that show, and they like pay for my Amtrak to get up at 3:30, go down there and come back up, and like that was pre-Zoom. And
Wow.
it's just like, you know, that would never happen now, right? Because everyone just zooms in. But
Yeah. I've done it in person there twice, but I was in DC, so I didn't know that they paid for Amtrak. You know, Republican money.
Maybe just for me.
They know how to fund their propaganda, Republicans.
I should have known not to get you going on that. All right, Tom Lovink. Happy Tuesday.
It's a fan favorite. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm just not. Sometimes I choose to be conflict averse. Sometimes I don't. Tom Lofink, happy Newsday Tuesday. Sorry to hear about Sam. Hope he gets well soon. I don't know me if you know that Sam has COVID. Yeah.
I texted him this morning.
On the topic of
good.
Europe, I would have preferred Britain to stay in the EU, but at the same time, I find it astounding how many liberals here in Britain seem to genuinely think that Britain's reputation was golden before Brexit, as if EU membership meant that the British Empire didn't happen. Good point. It's always snowy in Ottawa. Sam got COVID, so you wouldn't have to talk about AOC on the show. Wouldn't have to have AOC on the show this week. Talk about taking one for the team. I know, right? It's a running joke. It's a running joke that people write in, like, why won't AOC come back on the show?
Oh, it's just an AOC thing.
She's been on recently. Yes. Not that recent, but I don't even. Yeah. Still
recent enough.
Recent enough. Right. Left is toast. Why can't the left unite anywhere? Looks like even in France, the left is fragmented. In the US, we know how bad we infight. Same in India, same in Europe. Isn't it a good time to unite despite references and actually focus on results over ideology? With due respect, you are also part of the problem. You cover issues and takes like you only know the right answer, and everyone in left media does the same approach. It's a losing recipe in the war of communication and convincing the public.
Yeah, this is not a leftist. Like, I'm sorry. Like, this is history. It's
you're doing it, Matt. You're doing it right now.
And the powerful interests. Like, it's difficult to unite against that stuff. Just silly stupidity. I don't know.
Yeah, I really some of it is also provoked too. Like, we have to be real. Like, when articles are thrown at us, and then we have to be on defense all the time because they have so much money that they can just send out. They pick a topic to go after the left, and then everybody's forced to defend. And in some ways, it is the online world that we live in is preventing a lot of people from doing real organizing. They're learning about organizing, which is amazing, but that's why you need a militant, organized left. But we're all humans too. We're all susceptible to some of these provocations.
I just don't know, in the wake of like the Amazon unionization and Starbucks unionization, like this whole looking for the first possible indication that you can say, okay, the left's at it again. Look this is why they lose. I just think I think you should kill that voice in your head. I don't think it leads anywhere good. I don't think it has anything positive, like really think anything good to say, or like it's silly to me. I like, for the amount of time I've been doing this job, the amount of people that are like, this is why the left can never achieve anything. And no, it's not. This is not why.
Yeah. The reason why is messy. Everything you state is because we're dealing with an insurmountable number, not insurmountable, but like a Goliath of forces. And it's yeah, I mean, especially when you're like up against a preponderance of capital and power and things like that, it's a multi-headed dragon.
And that's why when you look at something like Amazon workers, what they've been able to do in Staten Island, they were extremely militant. They were extremely laser focused. They didn't want to get provoked by the typical union busting tactics. I mean, if you want to see a microcosm of how they go after the left, and how it's not just because like there's infighting. Like, a lot of it is provoked, a lot of it is smear campaigns, a lot of it is trying to bust the left. Just look at a union effort, look at the tactics that they use on a union, and knowing those tactics, these votes still come in really close because people are afraid of capital. So read your history, as Matt says.
And it's also like this pathology, or this narrative that the left is always infighting. It actually gets in the way of seeing like actual productive opportunities. Because like Chris Smalls, for instance, went on MSNBC, and everyone's like wondering what's going on with this Amazon AOC split. Well, Chris Smalls said very simply, like, we were disappointed, but this is a marathon, not a sprint, and everyone can redeem themselves. Like, I don't know, like, and so this entire thing of like, is this a referendum on AOC, or should, like, all that stuff was basically like, we could have just been listening to what the organizers themselves were saying.
That's right.
That's
right.
Exactly.
They're just weaponizing somebody who, they want to, who has tremendous ability to sway, and is a great symbol for the left, a great left win, and they want to weaponize her and weaken her. And
she evokes emotion in like the right and on the left, and so that's like a easy way to use that. Between the 1 and the 5, feel better, Sam. I actually knocked on a door this weekend of someone Sam knows very well. It was for Hugo Soto Martinez, a DSA union organizer candidate for city council here in LA. It was a really special moment for me. Like a full circle. My organizing work was really inspired by you guys. Michael especially had a very profound influence on my life. I was wearing a Majority Report hat, and it was just like everything coming together for a minute. Love you guys. Your work means a lot. Don't be foolish. Left is absolutely best. Thank you so much between the 1 and 1 on the 5.
That's so great.
And now on that note, let's turn to somebody who's quite unpleasant because we got to balance the show, yin and yang. Here is Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, this is Ben Shapiro at something known as the Fred and Linda Allen lecture series. Now, I've done a little bit of research on that. It looks like it's for the Young Americas Foundation.
These people are buying ads everywhere. They're crazy.
And I don't think that has
Fred
anything
and
to do with...
Linda Allen sounds like your next door neighbor,
I guess
right?
Fred Allen is a comedian,
Oh.
maybe from like the World War II era or something like that. But and yeah, like this is in Ben Shapiro. He's talking about climate change. Everyone knows. I forget the YouTuber's name. We need to look that up.
Regardless, but the guy who did the takedown of when Ben Shapiro, as maybe a college student or just a young pup.
No, he was a media person.
Oh,
It was like
okay. He
2015 or something like
just
that.
looks so young. We all know and have seen the clip of him saying to a crowd when talking about climate change that
You don't think you're just gonna move if the
right,
if
just
the sea
sell your
level
house.
rises, you don't think you're just gonna
Everybody,
move?
right? And when the tides begin to rise, everybody who is going to be affected by the tides rising will just be able to sell their house. Hey, numbnuts! Nobody's going to buy the underwater houses. But here he is updating that just completely poignant point.
Which says, again, this doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. It means what we ought to be doing is the thing that will prevent the 83 million deaths, which is why I'm very confident it will prevent the 83 million deaths, adaptation. This means, for example, that we build seawalls. The simple fact of the matter is that New Orleans exists below sea level. When the seawalls, when levees were breached because the levees were poorly built, it killed 10,000 people. When the levees, last time around, this last year, there's a major hurricane. It swept directly through the exact same area, and pretty much no one was killed. The reason being, the levees were much better built. When you're looking at coastal low-lying areas, seawalls have been built in places in Miami, in places in Seattle.
The Miami point is a very important one, Brad. If you can just take us back for a second. If you look at, they've brought in, I forget where it is, Denmark or whatever, whoever does a lot of these seawalls.
I forgot about this.
They've brought in, Florida has actually brought them in to consult, like, hey, we need to do this to save our cities too. And they found out, I think it's like limestone is the bedrock underneath all these Florida communities. And that's permeable, which means that water soaks it, which means you can't make walls out of it, or the water will just go under the wall through the limestone and soak up underneath. And so like Florida is really, really screwed, and you can't wall. You're gonna have to build a wall and a floor and a whole bunch of
That apartment complex, the sinkhole. I mean, there's sinkholes all over. The apartment complex that fell in, is horrible. This is so. You was like. This is like a propaganda. I mean, this is what we have to be thinking about is, 5 years ago, it would have been ridiculous for us to think that the Republicans could recruit young people. And it's happening through, crypto fascist communities, as we've talked about, through these foundations. They're putting so much money and so much energy into recruiting just enough people so that they win on those small little margins because they've gerrymandered and they basically gerrymandered the country so that they have to win by a small margin, and it's just enough. Who goes to these conferences?
Well, let's finish the clip and then see if he approaches a point that isn't just human innovation is going to solve all of this, going to solve these existential threats to our humanity. Even though conservatives have evolved from it's not happening to it's not man-made, it's just natural to well, it's happening. And we're just going to create a wall on Miami Beach to make sure that all of these things survive. I thought Florida was the conservative paradise. Shouldn't you guys be a little bit more conscious about it? But continue.
Low-lying areas. Seawalls have been built in places in Miami, in places in Seattle. Geoengineering, which is a methodology that's being explored largely in some of the Northern European countries for actually changing the climate itself by, for example, shooting particular types of material into the air. These sorts of solutions are things we should be pursuing. They're a lot easier.
I mean, not to be pro-China, but China's been doing that since I remember the Olympics over a decade ago. But I mean, good luck that this is going to counter CO2.
China, you say?
easier to do because technology is a lot easier to do than anything remotely approaching a global carbon tax, which will, number one, be unsuccessful, and two, will not mitigate the effects on the climate nearly as much as you're talking about. Human beings are great at adaptation, and we suck at mitigation. And as I said before, and been mocked for it, the simple fact of the matter is, over the course of the next 100 years, when you see all these maps, and it's like, this area will be flooded, and all those people will be dead. No, because they won't be living there. Because as it turns out, when the tide rises, people move inland. This is what has been happening throughout human history. Not a huge number of people were killed, presumably, when the land bridge between Russia and Alaska, that from which Sarah Palin could see, right? When that land bridge ended up being covered up in water, there weren't tens of thousands of people who died in that because it took thousands of years for that to be covered up by water.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's probably because there wasn't a large population center.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there also weren't
they didn't have cities.
No, but just in general, like we have so many more people too. It's like, even if you were going to take that theory, it was what are we, like 100 times, 1,000 times, more in population? This is so ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, what and who's going to build these seawalls, right? I thought he was all for small government. This sounds like this is going to require a massive amount of government investment. Did he bring up the possibility of the federal government subsidizing this when infrastructure was being debated?
And the other thing that this focus, and we talked with the folks of La Ruta del Clima about this on MR back at COP26 or whatever that was. So there's this focus on Ben Shapiro's mentioned this a few times, accommodation. We can accommodate to this threat as opposed to mitigate it, right? But there's a third factor that folks, particularly in the global south, will remind us of, which is about loss and damage. What happens about the stuff that we didn't mitigate or adapt fast enough to save? And there's already a whole bunch of communities that are already irrevocably destroyed by climate change, and what are we going to do for them?
Yeah, well, that's the point, right? Is this is an argument that is geared towards, it's incredibly Western and Americentric, Northern Hemisphere centric, and wealthy nation centric, because maybe there will be
slow-moving crises are not crises.
It's all right. Yeah, don't worry. Maybe there are some capitalists that are going to want to protect their investment in Miami Beach, and they're going to build some sort of wall, or maybe some forward-thinking governor will invest some state money in protecting, I don't know, parts of their city, for example. But when it comes to the communities in the global south, communities around the equator that might be affected by increase in hurricanes and storms, etc., that Ben Shapiro is uninterested in their communities having seawalls built around them. I mean, they might not have the capital to do that. Of course they don't, because and so essentially he's dooming those countries and those communities, even though the United States is disproportionately contributing to this problem. So we're going to contribute to the problem disproportionately. The brunt is going to be felt by these other nations who don't have the resources to build these mitigation these walls and these I don't know, different structures that I also have my doubts that are going to make a huge difference anyway, but regardless. So they're going to bear the brunt of it. And Ben Shapiro is going to say, well, that's the natural way of doing things. That's essentially natural selection. That's
exactly what it is. It's a natural selection argument. But even if it is a natural selection argument, which is based off of battle of the fittest and, essentially capital, it's still not true. Okay, so global south, look at Bangladesh, which is underwater and has the highest concentration of it's the most densely populated place on the planet. Still, even with that, let's just look at the US. Okay, every single major city in this country, there is not one place on the map in the United States where you can escape. I mean, this is the delusion now of certain Republicans who are so addicted to not paying taxes in the short term or keeping their income or finding some sort of financial benefit out of climate change in the short term is, I actually think, a form of psychosis, because these are the people who want to build cruises. I mean, seriously, they have like these massive cruise ships that they've bought where they all go on the cruise ships and go from climate disaster to climate disaster. This is a true thing that these like insane billionaires are doing, these like fascist billionaires. And these are also the same people, the Peter Thiels, the Elon Musks, these are the same people who are pushing destabilize the US dollar. These are the same people who are investing in technology, and they're putting money into these foundations, which are spreading these messages. All for what? Like, they're actually delusional at this point. You can't escape it. Every single city in America is dealing with this. New York City cannot afford to mitigate, as he says, or basically, like they're talking about building a wall here. Well, it's also people in cities like marginalized communities, public housing. Thank you, Robert Moses, for creating the disaster that we live in terms of climate preparation. It's delusional thinking at this point. I just don't understand, like, why can't we just have a conversation about how these people who are driving capital are absolutely insane? They're out.
They've lost their mind. I mean, they have oil spilling out of their ears, and then like it's just anything we can do to avoid the actual painful work of getting off fossil fuels. And like then, I mean, the guys, Mr. Facts and Logic. There is a really obvious logical solution here. It's obvious. It's just the one that none of these guys want to talk about because it might be a little bit painful to wean off of.
You know what?
It's necessary.
8 quarters, they're not going to have a planet to live on. So if you want to think in terms of capitalism, like, it's great. You took one final cruise around the planet before we imploded. Like, what?
From this delusional right winger to another, let's pull up that Jordan Peterson tweet. I thought you might find this this funny, Nomi. So Biden tweeted, "In America, healthcare should be a right, not a privilege." He's not a supporter of Medicare for all, so that's a separate conversation. Even though I don't know why you really tweet this, especially because he's not promoting any healthcare reform that's in any way substantial. But Jordan Peterson took it upon himself to respond to Biden here, saying, nothing that someone else is required to provide can be a right. This was his response.
What?
Nothing that someone else is required to provide can be a right. Now, right-wingers are in favor of gun rights, right?
Is Jordan Peterson?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, look.
As a mental exercise, though. Okay, go on.
I mean, this is the old libertarian bullshit about positive and negative rights.
Right.
And it's academic and boring to me as somebody who thinks that like healthcare should be a right.
Yeah.
Like it's just trying to use logic and like sort of fundamentalism about sort of philosophy to suggest a political plan of action, which is just silly.
Yeah, I agree. But like, I mean, I just want to go through some of our rights here.
But like the gun right, no one's to argue Peterson's side, no one's required to give you a gun. You just can get one if you want.
Right. But okay. All right. Then how about the requirement to a fair and speedy trial?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good
one that's provided for you. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's just
what about free speech?
Right?
Since
the
they
fact
love
that you
that.
have a right to an attorney. I mean, you could, I guess, be your own attorney. That would be the ultimate libertarian dream in terms of a right being provided for you. But it is interesting to me how he's gone full libertarian.
Should have a right to a Twitter account. That's not provided. Oh, wait a second.
That's enshrined in the Constitution, I thought.
Yeah, Elon Musk will make sure to lobby that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the idea that
but this is what he does. I mean, this is all Jordan Peterson exists to do, is to be a mouthpiece for right-wing talking points. He's not actually competent in anything that he really opines on. Like he can. We played that video of that Oxford Divinity scholar talking about like, yeah, this guy going on Joe Rogan and saying the Bible was the first book. Like, I don't know what he's even talking about. But the thing that he's talking about is that the right political parties, whether you're in Canada or the UK, are the ones to support.
Yeah. All right. Well, not as interesting as maybe I thought in terms of the discussion. Let's.
He's just getting old. That's kind of what's going on. Is
I think there's other stuff going on too.
The detox is going, let's say, complicated.
Kids don't eat an only meat diet.
Apple cider has been doing a number on me.
Calling from a 423 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Emma. This is Zack in Tennessee. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you, Zack in Tennessee?
I'm all right, Matt. Nomi, it's good to talk to you guys.
Be there.
I was, and my best wishes and prayers for Sam so that he can get better. It's kind of suspicious that he got COVID at the same time as Eric Adams and Nancy Pelosi. So I think we might need to have
It is suspicious.
with the Truth and Reconciliation Committee to see what really went on there at that restaurant.
Don't look too closely into it, because this is. I'll give you a little hint, Zach. This might have something to do with my takeover of the show. We're looking into changing the locks at the studio.
I saw, yeah, I think I saw some rough drafts of the new logo that just replaced the M with the EM on the majority report. So that's,
We're working on it. We're working on it.
that's hey, you got to be thinking ahead, and I appreciate that. So I live in rural red East Tennessee, and I agree with you that we have kind of flubbed our last year of legislating. I just want to say this from a person who lives in a area that is very red, very not progressive, to say the least. The people here definitely don't care about legislation. They didn't even know, and this could be the quote bad Democratic messaging, although I don't think that that's really a thing in regards to the child care tax credit, because while many of my friends were getting it, they didn't even know why they were getting it. But in addition to blaming, Democrats for losing it, we have to give them credit for at least putting it on the table, and really putting the onus on the right wing and I don't even say Republicans, I just call them right wing nut jobs.
It's not the right wing it's not the right wing that let the child tax credit expire, though. That was the Democrats control the Senate.
Well, they have a 50-50 Senate, so that means if they lose one prick like Joe Manchin, then it's a done deal. So yeah, I mean, you can't just let the other 50 off the hook. Like here in Tennessee, we have to, and especially what I'm really concerned about is places like North Carolina. I talked about Asheville before. Asheville is a very progressive city. It went hard for Bernie. However, because of gerrymandering, that district is represented by Madison freaking Cawthorn. So I put a lot of my energy into North Carolina. And so we need to put it to those voters in North Carolina that, hey, you lost this, not because of the Democrats necessarily, but because your shithead Senator Tom Tillis wouldn't vote for this package.
That's right.
And I'm trying to think of who the other senator is, some other dirtbag, I'm sure. So always be blaming the Democrats.
The Democrats have to do politics, and they actually have to ensure they can do two things at once. They can rip into Manchin. They could have been more aggressive. Biden did nothing to pressure Manchin publicly about this. Nothing. And they can. The best way to draw a contrast with Republicans and build your case to say look, all 50 Republicans opposed this bill is to actually get it passed.
Well, and the other thing that he could have done was he could have called out, I think I hear your point, and I think you're correct. Like Manchin is there by design to do exactly this, and anybody who doesn't see that at this point is like completely delusional or on the take. But Biden. Now, listen, there was a lot of tension behind the scenes, and it was reported on extensively of like what was happening between parts of the White House that I do think were acting in good faith, maybe, and Manchin. But Biden could have also pressured someone like Mitt Romney. I mean, Mitt Romney represents a state where, the average family is like 15 kids. Like, you think that they wouldn't want the earning up tax credit? Like, I'm serious. I don't mean to be.
Right. Yeah.
But he could have, let's see Mitt Romney go back to Utah voters in the Mormon community and say, sorry, guys.
Oh yeah, I know. I mean, those guys are probably making a nice little, you know, 300 times 17. You know, you're talking about $5,000 a month.
Yeah.
So
That's it. I mean, that's politics. Let me see. I know it sounds ridiculous, but at the end of the day, that's politics. And Democrats just don't seem interested in doing old school retail politics anymore. You know, anywhere that's not a swing district where they can buy, you know, $3 million of ad buys or something. You know, this by design is working out really well for the Democratic infrastructure. I don't think it's all of the establishment. I think that there are some frustrations, like internally. Obviously, we see these leaks coming out, and you know, the battles and the books that come out, like the new one about Nancy Pelosi, and like, you know, but the truth is exactly what you're saying. We got to operate in red states. North Carolina, I just had a guy on from the AAPI Victory Fund, and he was talking about a very important state. So in 10 years in North Carolina alone, the AAPI community has shifted the state so much in terms of immigration and coming of age based on immigration waves, and just being a much more progressive voting bloc. And that's partly because you have a community that has started organizations that started organizing on the ground. And so I think it went up 55%, if I'm correct, in North Carolina, but you know, we can go back and watch an interview on my show if you want to see it. But it's shifted the demographics so much that now there's a congressional seat where Nidal Alam is running, that is up, you know, a progressive could win it.
Well, they had back in 2016 when the right wingers overreached and tried to pass what they called HB2, which was kind of the first bathroom bill. I thought we were done with those nightmares, but now it's coming back. Yeah. It led to a Democratic governor, a Democratic Supreme Court, a lot of, I mean, on a lesser note, a lot of organizations like the NBA canceled their All-Star game, which was to be held in Charlotte. Pearl Jam canceled a couple of concerts. So, I mean, I just want us to, in addition to critiquing Democrats, I mean, I don't want us to just completely always hammer them, especially when the next thing is fascism. And I just want to say I really appreciate all your guys' your work, the Majority Report, Bender and his show, and Matt. I've been watching some Left Reckoning, even though I'm a little bit more left of center, but it's a really good show. And Emma, I just want to see what you think about my Tampa Bay Lightning on the way out. If you think they are fading fast,
I'll take I'll take your answer off air, Zach.
All right,
Lightning fan
Bye-bye.
in Tennessee. Interesting.
Have a good week.
You too.
Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, I was born in Tampa.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, my friend.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, look, the Lightning can get hot whenever the playoffs hit. I mean, they think the salary cap's a myth. So, I mean, in the playoffs it is. You can put a guy on IR and then there's no salary cap in the playoffs in the NHL, which makes zero sense. But that's how they won the cup that other time. You can never count them out. They are the defending champs. I don't want the Rangers to face them in the first round, but I think, you know, there are my opinion on the East is that there are 4 teams that have a legit shot. It's way stronger than the West. It's the Panthers, it's the Carolina Hurricanes, it's the Rangers, which is hard for me to say because it gets my hopes up, and it is the Lightning because of course they have all of that talent on the roster.
What is IR?
Injured reserve.
Okay, thank you.
So you can keep the basically in the NHL, you can keep a player on injury and then bring them back miraculously for the playoffs, and this team and still be over the salary cap and have more talent than another team. So that's what this
Emma, you know how I think you're going to build your media empire?
How so?
I think you're going to do a show, and it's like the part of it is Desperate Housewives and part of it is sports, and you have conquered everything. That's it.
Desperate House, you know, Real Housewives, please.
Real Housewives. I'm sorry.
Real Housewives,
I don't watch it. I clearly, I'm like.
Then yeah, the diversity of my interests, that none of them are laudable, but they are.
And then I can come on and do a cooking segment if you let me.
Absolutely. Then we've covered everything.
You're like, this is how you take over the Democratic Party, guys. Okay, little paprika here.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, you got to get into some of that cultural stuff. So I considered making an alternative Twitter account for my sports takes, but maybe somebody who sees my sports takes will then see my political takes. So I'm just, keeping it all out there.
What about a TikTok?
God, no.
Come on.
I can barely do Instagram. Have you read my email? When Sam is back in the world of the living, a short skit where Sam is locked out of the studio while the crew is talking union rights does sound fun. Emma flipping him off from behind the window and stuff. We'll float that. An opportunity to flip Sam off for a skit. I'd do it. Talia from Tampa, Madison Cawthorn is literally the Hitler Youth Congressman. The fact that he's allowed to be a congressman and hasn't been either indicted or completely shunned in itself is an indictment of our country. Yeah.
I mean, we have had some pretty grotesque Congress people in the history of that august institution.
We've had some senators that are like, that were buddy with our current president that
right. I was gonna say, like, go read like senators speaking in like the 1930s or something like that, or Congress people. It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
Even the stuff they wrote, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Right.
And in a way, like that is more welcome in Congress than say redistributionary politics.
Drew Peacock, why do you think meteorologists are seemingly more inclined to believe climate change propaganda from the right? Anecdotal, but Kansas City's most beloved meteorologist just gave the "I don't think it's an emergency, climate ebbs and flows" argument on Twitter.
Yeah.
Gary Lazak.
Wow.
I think it's because
they're the chiropractors of
yes.
climate.
That's so good, Matt.
That's so
you got
good.
it.
Yeah, that's just so good. They are inclined to believe in like the effect of catastrophic events. There's some people that Joe Rogan has on, like what's his name, Randall Carlson. They're inclined to believe pseudoscientific perspectives about how catastrophic events change our climate indelibly, as opposed to a chain of human reactions that have set our climate on its current path, as all of the preponderance of scientific thought has agreed upon.
And they're also, I mean, let's not forget the majority of local news is like Sinclair, and they choose they want to hire. And many people you may think are meteorologists on screen are not meteorologists. They're just there reporting the weather. So like there's even a distinction between who's an actual meteorologist and who isn't. But again, like chiropractic.
I was thinking when you said meteorologist, I was thinking of the meteor thing. Like that's how tired I am today.
Wait, did they look into meteors?
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
I mean that is
so scratch that. That didn't make any sense when I brought up Randall Carlson. Just completely forget.
I was like, who's that?
Yeah, just forget about it. I was not thinking straight. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean that is.
I need more coffee.
The problem is like they're television personalities.
Yeah.
And like this is the problem with TV news in general. Is like people might have qualifications and stuff like that, but like these are some of the worst institutions we could be trusting our understanding of our local communities to, because it's like, oh, what did the cops say we need to be worried about today?
Yeah.
Oh, here's some local sports, and then here's our weather guy from not from here. Like I don't know. It's sad that I think of like my grandma like watching the nightly news every night, and it's like you might get some good stuff with like the farm report or something, but otherwise it's like what is underneath your sink that's going to be killing your kids next week.
Right. When it bleeds, it leads. Exactly. Whew, that was a senior moment from.
And they always like the guys always have that horrible dye job. Have you noticed that? No, it doesn't matter what city you're in. It's the same guy wearing like a very obvious pinstripe suit, like super thick pinstripes, a yellow tie, and like a purple
remember
shirt.
The last time I watched like local news as opposed to just seeing a headline in passing at the gym or something like that. But I do like that one weather guy from I think North Carolina who does those dances. He's pretty good.
That guy really annoys me.
Who's that?
We're not in sync today.
Can we put him on screen? Who is that?
People can look it up.
It's really irritating.
Come on, please.
All right. While I'm reading IMs, Matt will find it. This is his Lin-Manuel Miranda cringe thing, right? Where he says Tim Kaine in the membrane. That's the thing that sets my hair. Stands up on the back of my head. Oh my God. All right, we're really gonna watch this guy?
Yes, please.
Because now I feel embarrassed that I find this entertaining. All right, here we go.
Yeah, it's
He's just like this white dude that.
a white dude who does black dances.
Oh no! Now he has. But this is not the original one. Oh, he does. He dances.
No, he's
with
got a
this
whole
black
career
guy.
on this now.
Damn it! Now
The
it's-
hotspot. You're all suited and booted. You're looking good, man.
Look at Nick. You know,
shit.
Nick
I haven't
looked
seen
nice
this one.
this morning.
Stop.
I'm gonna skip to him dancing.
Yes, please do.
Oh my God, no.
You gotta hit the beat right. Ready? Here we go. 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah. Ooh. Slide, baby. Slide. What? Yeah.
All right, now turn it off. 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 That is not what I had seen before. That is not what I'd seen before. I thought he was just like a TikTok dude.
Well, I mean,
And I thought part
I'm
of the
looking him
joke
up.
was that he's like corny and white.
well, like,
Nope.
sort of,
No.
but it's also. I feel like a lot of it is like, yeah.
Wait, what's his name? I'm gonna find him on.
Weatherman?
That's it.
I think.
Weather forecast guy. That guy.
Yeah. All right.
Ugh.
Just.
There's a lot of these accounts, guys. There's a lot of weather forecasters doing insane
I'm
things.
having. I'm
actually. That's worse than being against climate change.
I'm having a bad 5 minutes on the show.
Oh my God, this is so
Wipe it
horrible.
away. All right, let's do one of these clips here. Okay, this Tucker thing. This was pretty disgusting. So anytime somebody wants to tell you about how going to or being associated with an Ivy League automatically gives you some sort of credibility, here's another example for you to have in your portfolio of the kinds of people that some of these institutions allowed to not just enter their universities, but teach their students. This is Penn law professor Amy Wax, who is one of the more racist people in public life, talking to Tucker Carlson on his daytime program where he launders some of his more, I think, offensive or like raw guests, tries them out for his late night show. Or
the Charles Murray slot.
Yeah, sometimes they'll have, Michael Tracy on too, right? If they're not big enough for prime time. So yeah, Amy Wax is in the Charles Murray vein, talking about, you guessed it, people of color, and how the reason that maybe they have animosity towards white people is because Western culture has just trumped all of the contributions from non-white people in society, and she makes this claim with a straight face.
How is that different from vandalism? It just seems like people coming in and wrecking everything that was valuable in an institution that they never built themselves.
It's very reckless and destructive. It's very vindictive. It's very angry.
Yeah. Where does that anger come from, do you think?
I think there is just a tremendous amount of resentment and shame of non-Western peoples against Western peoples for Western peoples' outsized achievements and contributions. I mean, it's really unbearable. I was actually,
I'm
leaving
so
aside
sorry.
American blacks, who I think
Oh
do
my
feel
God.
that resentment and
I
shame and envy. I mean, it's this unholy brew of sentiments. I was talking to Glenn Lowry about this bizarre fact that Asian and South Asian, Indian doctors at Penn Med, which I know people there and I know what's going on there, that they're on the ramparts for the anti-racism initiative for Dump on America. America's an evil racist place. These are immigrants.
The number one highest income group in America is
Hate America.
Right.
A goodly number of them,
But
not all.
you're from a group.
Hate
I mean,
America,
first of all, I hate even
non-white
thinking in terms of groups anyway, because what matters is the individual, obviously. But as long as we are, if you're a member of the highest income, highest achievement group in America, and you're looking down another group, native-born whites, for example,
Wait,
and
pause
saying,
and just keep it up. What matters most is the individual, obviously. But listen, while we make broad strokes arguments about entire groups of people and don't treat them as individuals whatsoever. and claim that they have like collective resentment about Western culture as opposed to, I don't know, their own individual experience in
Like
society.
psychoanalyze people broadly as a race and how they're all haters for the great things that we built.
All right, continue.
You're the problem. Like, how does that work exactly?
Well, that is, to me, utterly bizarre and fascinating. And
why does anybody put up with that?
Right. I'm not saying all Indian immigrants are this way. I'm just saying you look at the roster of, who's leading the programs, the endless number of programs where they talk about diversity and racism and all the racism that people have to encounter in medicine and how racist medicine is and all this. And you see these brown faces or you see these Asian faces and you think, literally you think,
oh my God,
you're
I can't.
coming from your country, which you're implying is equal or better than our country. And you're telling us how awful we are. What's the...
Oh, look at him laughing, this fucking smug pig. Sorry, but whatever. Actually, not at all.
This is
the idea. It's white nationalist stuff. The idea that that Tucker can be smug as he rants about U.S. elites, about the fact that there are caste systems in other nations, as opposed to one of the worst income stratification situations in any developed country, some of the worst income inequality, that it's a de facto class system that we have here,
but it's not based on
that.
Exactly, like in his mind or his it's about battle of the fittest. If you can't just figure out your way as an individual, as a rugged individual, how to make it into the wealthy stratosphere, then that's your problem. It's not because we have these other structural issues that are all classified by race or pre-existing because of race. Is anybody else triggered by this? I think this is on another level, even for Tucker. This woman,
this is racial supremacy.
Yeah.
People should be writing, I'm sorry, they're going to come after me for this one. You go to UPenn, maybe you want to bring this up and share it with some folks because maybe they haven't seen it.
Yeah, this is I think this is the crucible of ideas that we should be put into scrutiny. I mean, what it reminds me of is there's this old thing I clipped from AP report about a bunch of white descendants of Thomas Jefferson wanted to keep out the black descendants of Thomas Jefferson from Monticello.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
And this guy goes on this sort of psychoanalysis. This guy who is literally one of the people opposing inclusion of the people who were descended from Thomas Jefferson through Sally Hemings. And he makes it about their psychoanalysis. So here's this clip.
It's their land.
This is a good guy.
And that graveyard is their graveyard just like it's mine. Just like it belongs to me. They're descendants of Thomas Jefferson.
The Trust Court is in a minority. The association is intensely proud of its tradition and guards it carefully. John Hubbard is a retired teacher. His father and son are buried here.
Well, I think the black community doesn't have much of a heritage. Their heritage goes back probably to about the Civil War and not much beyond that. I think that it's very important to them to establish this link because it gives them a heritage that otherwise isn't there.
What?
So that guy literally psychoanalyzing these black folks after this, he was proven wrong through DNA and just scientific testing that, yes, as everybody knew even at the time, Thomas Jefferson raped his slave and fathered children. And there are descendants still living from them. That guy had to psychoanalyze it that they're inventing that because they want a tradition of their oon. And I'll just say that's
they want to be, because the only traditions are Western traditions. They want to glom onto that,
exactly.
and they're not welcome.
And that's the projection there, because the only thing that these people really value is the exclusion of other people.
Yeah, and that is what the entire conversation about Western culture is. It's a denial of history in order to feed one's narcissism about their special place in the world. That's what Tucker appeals to. That's what Amy Wax is appealing to with the audience there. The lauding of Western society and the denial of history. They can't say this, but what they really think is the nations that we colonize, or that not we, but Western nations colonized, exploited, raped, murdered, pillaged, that they were lesser people that were deserving of that violence, and if they wanted to resist that violence, man, they maybe should have been stronger. That's what they feel, and yet they can't say it, so they have all of these workarounds, and this is what they foment.
Also, she cites Glenn Lowry there, and this is just an open call. I don't follow Glenn Lowry's work closely, but if anybody has anything to say, because the impression that I get is this guy is just someone who lobs up softballs to racists and doesn't challenge them. So I'm curious if that is an accurate assessment of his work. Because yeah, Bradley has another quote from her here. Take Penn Law School or some top 10 law school. Here's a very inconvenient fact. I don't think I've ever seen a black student graduate in the top quarter of the class, or rarely in the top half. I can think of one or two students who scored in the top half of my required first-year course, and said that Penn Law has a racial diversity mandate for its law review. That's from a podcast she did with Glenn Lowry in 2017. So she really likes Glenn Lowry. So I mean,
oh my God!
And she's speaking there about her own students.
I can't. I'm sorry. This is. How does she have a job right now? This is insane.
Tenure, I'm sure. But like, I bet I wonder if she might have. With her preconceived notions, had some sort of biases about a black student's paper in her class.
Of
Just
course.
wondering.
I mean, regardless of what she said is true or not, I mean, there's a million other factors. This is absolutely bonkers. I mean, this is so bonkers that, like, Fox is obviously very conservative, but there are a lot of people that are part of News Court that I don't think would let this even fly on like Fox Nation. I'm super fascinated to see. I don't know. I feel like the way that we went after, and everyone went after Bill O'Reilly, was through funding mechanisms. And this is outrageous. This is bad for Fox. This is bad for News Corp.
Yeah, but Tucker has this kind of untouchability because he is their top rated host, so they give him
so is Bill O'Reilly
license to do what he wants. And I don't know when this train is going to end. Or when it's gonna, the end of the road is gonna be for Tucker here, but he's gonna continue to push the limits until he's unable to do so, because he knows there's an appetite for this kind of stuff.
Isn't it crazy all this wokeness on college campuses?
Yeah,
yep.
This is crazy.
Those two non-elites doing populism right there.
Yep, exactly. Actually, mega pedantic point. Pretty ironic for Tucker to use the term vandalism to describe the crudeness of non-Western cultural behavior.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I mean, but like vandalism is a way to. It's another dog whistle.
Mm-hmm.
Kid tested Politburo approved. Didn't this teacher go viral speaking on Zoom making racist statements? Was that her?
Which teacher?
Amy Wax.
Oh, really? Well, I mean.
Professor, I think they meant.
I mean, what about the other law professors there? I mean, seriously, this is. I don't want to claim over this. Like, I actually think that she could get fired for this. I mean, tenure or not, like there are some limitations here. I mean, other law professors could take a stand. I just can't see how
she's been doing this since 2017.
That's fine. I mean, Bill O'Reilly did it for 20 years. There's a point where people pay attention and call it out, and that's our job. We're putting it on air, so folks, in
2021, Wax wrote that the United States is better off with fewer Asians. That's a quote. Claiming Asians are ungrateful for the advantages of living in the United States and vote disproportionately with the, quote, pernicious Democratic Party, which she called, quote, mystifying because the Democratic Party, quote, demands
She's constantly mystified for somebody who's given such a platform.
Yeah.
I'm simultaneously perplexed and fascinated by these, non-white people who misbehave all the time.
Perhaps as an academic, you could just like come up with an answer.
Yeah. Someone do a DNA test on her. I'd love to see.
Democratic Party, quote, demands equal outcomes despite clear group differences and, quote, valorizes blacks. She favorably cited Enoch Powell when calling for stricter race-based immigration restrictions towards Asians.
Was Enoch Powell the British? I forget. Is he the British racist?
And here's an answer for you, Nomi. Penn Law's school dean, Theodore Ruger, called Wax's statements about Asians racist, white supremacists, and diametrically opposed to the policies and ethos of this institution. Glenn Lowry, the Brown professor who hosted the interview, called her comments outrageous, blah, blah, blah. As of January 5th,
still has Glenn Lowry's name in her mouth, so maybe Lowry needs to be a little bit more forthright about the type of people he's talking about, race on his podcast with.
As of January 5th, nearly 9,000 law students have signed a petition to have Wax suspended.
You think?
Yeah. The comment.
Right. Hey guys, this is Pennsylvania. There's an election happening. Maybe one of the people running for Senate right now could make a comment on this. Let's elevate this a little bit. This is insane. This is Don't worry, she'll have a show on Fox Nation tomorrow.
Oh no! Like if
she's not young enough.
If the petition was
Murdoch.
if the petition was successful, that's true. If the petition was successful, she'll be the new IDW sort of star.
Oh, totally.
Matt's Bong. Speaking of salary caps, Emma, what is your take on leagues with salary caps? Isn't it just a mechanism to exploit players and pay them less than what they are worth? It depends. I'm in favor of a salary floor and a much higher cap than is in existence right now. I do like the parity in the NFL. That's different than but I wish that there was more of like a luxury tax exemption like they have in the MLB so that you can pay players more. But there needs to be a higher salary floor and a higher salary cap, especially given the fact that gambling and things like that are going to inflate the amount of money that these owners are getting a lot in the next few years. So some of these contracts are going to look like peanuts in comparison.
Yeah, why don't they have a salary cap on the owners and the executives?
Yeah, I mean that's the salary cap I'm interested in is the wealth caps. I would in any negotiations against salary caps.
I like the way it helps smaller market teams. That's just my one thing. But and I say that as a Giants fan coming from a huge market team. But in terms of paying players more, I'm 100% in favor of it. Wyoming Ryan. Ooh. We all know what Florida is going to do to build their seawalls, tax money. Republican states are quick to apply for federal disaster money anytime a climate incident occurs. Yes. Take Kentucky, for example, when both Kentucky senators were not in favor of it when it came to New Jersey or other states experiencing natural disasters.
I like how New Orleans was his example for how we can just easily adapt to this stuff. One of the worst catastrophes of my lifetime.
But they rebuilt the wall. They just rebuilt the levee. And so the last hurricane, which was clearly not as strong as the one that we're talking about, Katrina, don't you know, it's just rebuild the wall. Just make some money, build a levee, you'll be fine.
Just do it right and cheaply. Do it the best way and cheapest way, and I'll be fine. It's like, well, they try that all the time, but we got a lot more levies than that around here. Which one are we going to prioritize?
Right. Okay, let's watch this TikTok. The guy running against Bobert. All right, Nomi, you've worked in organizing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of this messaging from congressional, and you've worked on campaigns, of course, you've had your own campaign. What do you think of this kind of messaging from congressional candidate Alex Walker, who has branded himself as, quote, the gay Democrat who's going to take down Lauren Boebert? He released a TikTok criticizing the leftist critique of him for having moderate Democratic policies. Is this the right tone you want to strike with voters? Let's see.
I love when people are like, you have a moderate policy, you lost my vote.
Oh, what vote was that? Was that the vote you were going to give to some Bernie wannabe whose overkill policies are unpopular with 75% of voters, just so you could feel good about yourself until they lose the general election, at which point you'll point your finger and blame someone else? That vote? Oh.
This goo goo gaga uptalk voice he's doing is Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder does a similar thing as that.
Oh, interesting.
Until they lose the general election, at which point you'll point your finger and blame someone else? That vote? Oh, honey, your vote got lost a long time ago. Democrats need to wake up. Jesus, in order to legislate, we have to win. Go to walkerforcolorado.com and stop complaining.
Oh,
that's so cute. What's he auditioning for?
I don't know. Does blatant condescension translate well in terms of turning out people?
I mean, it seems to work when the establishment has your back. Sure. I see it all the time working, unfortunately. But I do think it catches up with you. What I love is he's like 75% of voters don't agree with Bernie's policies. Which one would that be? Would it be Medicare for all? Would it be free college? Let's just go through the list, buddy. What moderate policy, aka non-policy, watered down incrementalist? Like, come on, dude. I want to debate him. Can we invite him on the show? Can we have fun with this guy? He wants
Honestly,
attention.
maybe. Well,
and listen,
yeah,
I can
sure.
also do the Goo Gaga voice. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, he would have probably been against a lot of policies that benefit him today.
Yeah.
Remember when Hillary Clinton didn't support gay marriage? Because I do.
It is fascinating to see, like, I don't know if he's getting any advice from some sort of consultant or something like that. And like, if you want to run as a moderate, I get in Boebert's district, he's probably not going to win regardless. But if you want to run as a moderate in the district, okay, maybe he'll win. I don't think so based on the messaging here. It's just like talking down and condescending voters and mocking people who have questions about your policy sets. It's just probably not the right way to go about things.
What's his name again?
His name is Alex Walker. He is, according to LinkedIn, Lauren Boebert's worst fucking nightmare.
I love that. I kind of love his energy, weirdly enough, because of that.
He's a Stanford class president. He graduated Stanford, where he did looks like a bunch of venture capital stuff, and where he's been doing. It looks like he CEO'd his own sort of software ventures a couple times after graduation, which, you know, good for you. And worked at some tech companies, and now he's running for Congress. So I don't know.
Do we know how much money he raised?
He did win class president in 2012 of Stanford University. So you know, I guess he is such a winner that we should just stop
I'd rather have
caring
Boebert.
about universal health care.
I'd rather have Boebert.
Honestly, fight it out. Good for you if you want to win, but you get nothing from me, pal.
If Boebert has no committee assignments and no ability to, I mean, it was more Marjorie Taylor Greene who was stripped of those, right? That hasn't come yet, but if she's basically isolated and unable to influence policy, I'd rather have Boebert.
Well, and you have to keep in mind when you have these races, there's a lot of people challenging like really unpopular figures, and there's a lot of money to be raised on both sides. It used to be that like the consultants would make all their money on the red to blue seats or the blue to red seats, meaning the swing districts. Now it's like, oh, find some outrageous person in office and run against them. You have no chance of winning based on, you know, the makeup of the district. But guess what? Everybody's donating. So be careful, guys. When you're donating to these candidates, like that may not have a chance just based on how the district lines up. Like everyone's making money in every single direction. Every consultant, on both sides. And we saw with Jamie Harrison and Lindsey Graham. Like,
yep.
There just wasn't the
of money,
infrastructure there.
like we saw with Amy McGrath, another campaign that was like not designed to build anything sustainable in that state. And it's just a bunch of money coming in.
That's exactly it.
I don't actually prefer Lauren Boebert, but in terms,
Yeah, I don't support this. My nonpartisan policies are rooted in values, not politics. Lean government,
which is
fair
why I'm
treatment,
running for a political office.
a small government. The government can barely. Yeah, I don't support this guy. I think he should lose. The government can barely get out of bed in the morning. Why should it tell us what and how to care for our own bodies? So lower taxes, medical freedom. I wonder what that is about. And
Is he
the
accusing
guns I probably agree
the
about.
government of being a late sleeper?
So this guy's against mandates. Small government, no mandates, medical freedom.
Alex Walker is this guy?
Yeah.
Wait,
The left supports public programming's mandating how and if you find healthcare. They cite rising healthcare costs and medical debt among folks who forego insurance because it's too expensive. Their solution is to regulate the marketplace in order to improve access. He says both sides have a point. I mean, screw this guy. I hope he loses.
I think he also should be running in the Republican primary. If he wants to go that, he actually might defeat her in the Republican primary.
Yeah, be a log cabin Republican.
Totally.
Josh from Tucson, I bet that dude is totally into crypto.
1 billion% into crypto.
Yeah.
I'm now stalking him.
Cawthorn, a fragile tree.
Can we please invite him on the show?
Cough, cough, Beto O'Rourke cough about somebody whose campaign is going to get a ton of money from out of state and is going to fail. Yeah. What an idiot that guy is. Why did he run for president? It's hubris. He really, if he just reserved it to a second bite at the apple with Cornyn maybe, or in this gubernatorial race, maybe he would have had a shot, but it is just, I don't think it's going to go well for him. Thames Darwin, guys, I work at Penn. Amy Wax is bulletproof because of tenure. That was my guess.
It's just tenure. That's it. I
As
feel
long
like there's
as she
got to be
doesn't ditch
some.
her classes or fuck her students, she'd have cause to sue the school. That's a risk Penn doesn't want.
Why did they hire her? And how long does her tenure last? Let's get to the bottom of this.
Yeah. My new name. Tucker is keen on featuring guests who are groomers of race science. Yeah. Entrama, hope y'all and everyone else in Brooklyn are staying safe after the shooting at the 36th Street station. I have a family member who was close to being on the train, and we're all pretty shook. Yeah.
Wow.
Look, I mean, I for everybody who was shot, we still, I don't want to comment on this while we're still awaiting details, but it's a very scary situation, and I'm glad all of us here were okay. And yeah, but my heart goes out to the people that were shot there. It seemed really scary.
They there was a press conference about an hour ago. You guys, I think we're just starting to get on air. And I mean, just for folks who do live in New York, like, be aware that the subway system is going to be really backed up today. Like, there's a lot of subway stops that are shut down, like even in Manhattan because of this. So just beyond, like, the effects of this, like, folks have been late to work, that aren't able to get home. They showed a worker who was like, I have no way of getting home now. It's a horrifying situation, and the guy's still on the run. So, but they have issued some sort of description, and they had camera footage of him. So
yeah, I mean, the Uber was like, release a press release. Oh, we're suspending surge fees.
Oh yeah,
during this time period. Thank you so much. How benevolent.
Yeah.
Just like, how about for 12 hours, just fund rides in New York. But that's not going to happen. All right, let's go back to the phones.
They should pay reparations to taxi drivers. It's like,
and yes, they should. That's a good point.
And maybe we should call all the Obama administration people who work at Uber and ask them how supportive they are.
Maybe after we get off the phone with Jay Carney at Amazon. He still hasn't, I don't think, tweeted after the successful union push. Calling from an 801 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hello.
This is Spencer from Utah.
Spencer from Utah. What's on your mind?
Hey guys, how y'all doing?
I'm okay.
Happy Tuesday.
Yes, Newsday Tuesday.
I had jokes, but they're all for Sam. But I did write things down, so I'll go quick. I'm in Utah. I just kind of wanted to give an update about trans stuff that's going on out here.
Yes.
I'm sure you've read things in the news with, like, Governor Cox vetoing a bill. If you're catching Tucker Carlson, I think Carlson said some crap about him. I have no idea. But on the ground, I work in public schools. I work in secondary schools. They're like, 13 to 18-year-old kids. And in at least two of the biggest districts here, like, kids aren't allowed to wear pride flags, like the pride colors or even trans colors. One classroom that I'd frequently work in, we had those flags on the wall, and then we had to take them all down. But
what? This is a public school,
exactly.
you said?
And these are in public schools. Yeah, these are in like two of the largest districts in the state.
That's not legal. Also,
no,
it's
not.
a rainbow.
The ACLU already ruled on like some girl's T-shirt that said like F school or something like that. And that was fairly recently, but these are it's all going at the same time. I just wanted to point out that it's like it's happening on the ground in a way that you don't see with things like a bill and like Governor Cox. It's really small too.
And I appreciated his explanation for his vetoing, right? I mean, there are 4 trans athletes in the state, I think was his explanation, and only one was a female trans athlete. So you're making a bill to target one girl.
Literally.
One girl. And that's tells you everything you need to know about this movement.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the part that everybody sees on the outside that makes it all the way out to, your end of the country.
Right.
But the other things, I have trans kids in my classes that's like, there's no indoctrination going on. They were there on the first day of school. That's where I met them. They were already them. So, I mean, it's just kind of weird. And I wanted to give a note on kind of the other end, like the other end of it, of where I see some other bad things going on. It's like, once you build rapport with students, they start to just openly say things to you because they trust you. You don't have to even prompt them necessarily. They'll just say it. So like one day, a young teenage boy tells me how much he hates the gay voice, that voice. If you don't know that voice, go listen to David Cross's bit on it and you'll laugh, but then you'll know the gay voice. But even then, like I said, I build rapport with students and I ask them, do you guys listen to podcasts for fun? And then they openly say, yeah, Joe Rogan.
Oh, no.
So,
why is he
your
fun?
15-year-old boys out here that's what's cool to them. And that's where they get their information from. And they're 13, it's tough for them to decipher what's bullshit and what's not.
Yeah. I know. I mean, it's indoctrination, I guess. And I don't think Rogan gets enough grief for being anti-trans in a way that I was frankly ignorant of in terms of how virulently anti-trans he was before his overt right-wing turn. Like a few years ago, he was still talking about this stuff that I wasn't a listener except for the purposes of commenting on it for my job. Like, so I wasn't aware of that. But that's a huge part of too, like the rallying around Dave Chappelle and stuff like that. There is a lot of that trans people make men who are insecure about their own masculinity question that, and that is the ultimate crime for those kinds of insecure people, is that it makes them unsure about their own gender identity, and that insecurity is easily exploited by bro science dudes like Rogan.
Oh yeah, 100%. I see that in some of these kids. Again, they're still growing because they're kids, man. You haven't decided what you want to be altogether, even by the time you're 20 and you're out of the hands of the public school system. But it's funny you said indoctrination. That was my last note. I mean, talk about indoctrinating kids. These dudes, white dudes that are our age and that support Joe Rogan, get all pissed off about him getting taken off of Spotify, but he's not. It's like 10 episodes or some dumb shit. And then in reality, it's their kids who are like in their teenage years and really developing their personalities of who they will be that are actually listening to it. Talk about indoctrination. Anyways, I'll take the rest of it off the air. Shout out to everybody. Hope Sam feels better. Matt, see you on Left Reckoning. Peace out, y'all.
Later. Thanks, Spencer.
And like the other thing that we may not even be considering enough is these parents are like our age or my age, not your age. Like their kids are coming of age. Their brains are developing. They don't fully develop until they're like in their mid-20s in terms of boys. But they're listening. I mean, they're hearing it from their parents too. I still think, I don't know, maybe there's somewhere in the universe where people get deprogrammed, but this is essentially the Republican strategy. They knew 20 years ago, as we've discussed ad nauseum, that they were losing support and they had to utilize whatever pathway possible to make sure that they get their tax breaks. I mean, they can't get away with some of the more aggressive cultural things that they used to say, at least openly, but they're trying.
Yeah.
They're trying.
Madison Cawthorn's Fragile Tree says, in high school, I got most of my information from Jon Stewart. I know, not the best, but in your opinions, who is worse, John or Joe? I mean, that's not particularly close.
Then Joe Scarborough?
I think he means Joe Rogan.
Oh, Jon Stewart's better, yeah.
Much better.
Jon Stewart, I don't know. You're going to go after me and say I'm a lib, but like for that era, he was revolutionary. I mean.
Well, for me, it's like hard for me to understand because or even look back and retroactively critique it. I know that, it meant a lot to me when I was in middle school and high school, But it's hard. I was also really into Obama when he got elected. Although to my teenage credit, I was pretty disillusioned with him by 2010. But
well, and there's folks who don't remember, like, we didn't really have any infrastructure on the left like 5 years ago. So
yeah,
you can't use today's standards of critiquing the media to assess, the mid 2000s. And even then, he wasn't that bad compared to anybody today.
I think generically, I mean, David Feldman's gone into this. Jon Stewart has some pretty anti-union politics, and there's some things to criticize him on. But as far as like being a voice of sort of anti-Iraq war voice, like he was important.
Yep.
And this is at a time when people are getting fired for speaking out like that. So, this is.
Yeah. All right. Let's take one more call. Calling from a 314 number. Who's this? Where you're calling from? You're going to be the final call of the day.
This is Jennifer from St. Louis. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Hi, Jennifer.
Great. So I am just calling to kind of give you a little daily dose of like Gen X energy.
Okay.
Sam is home resting.
Right.
Because, somebody's got to say dude like 17 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just calling to say, hey, dudes.
Hey, dude.
And I hope you guys are good, and I hope he's getting better. And the other thing I want to say, and this is kind of for him, so I hope he's listening, but I'm like 2 years younger than him, and he keeps talking about how he's old, and he keeps using that word.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, we're not old yet. Like,
You're not old yet.
I refuse. Well, no, we're not old. I refuse to use that word until I can collect my Social Security.
Hell yeah.
So I'm like, when I'm 62, you can call me old, because that's the earliest I can get it. So I'm like, no, we're not going there yet.
Yeah.
He just feels that way because we're all, collectively
relative,
right? Together, our combined ages are like
his
90, a little less.
You mean the rest?
Sorry,
of the people
in the studio. In the studio.
I was like, I'm like, excuse me, no.
86 combined. Bradley says, yeah. Although I do turn 28 on Monday, but
yeah, it is. I know, and I've been in that situation too, where you're like clearly the oldest person in the room, and you make that cultural reference, and everybody's like crickets. And you're like, oh, okay, now I gotta explain who, I can't think of one, like Foghorn Leghorn. I have to explain who this is.
Yeah, right. All right, well, Jennifer, really appreciate that kind of perspective, and we'll try not to make Sam as old jokes, because.
Well, no.
Yeah.
He's just tired. He's just tired, Jennifer. Jennifer, is Cori Bush your congresswoman?
She is my congresswoman.
You're
Our
so
office
lucky.
is about 5 minutes from my house.
I know where that office is.
Yeah.
I've been there. That's
On
great.
Page? Well, you probably don't know the name of the street.
I don't remember the name of the street. Yeah, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You're very, very
No,
lucky.
She is. I know. I'm very happy. I do a monthly donation to her just so she's got a little help build that base of money, so she doesn't have to make as many phone calls, because that's craziness.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jennifer. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
You're welcome. And Emma, please don't say that it's just you. You said that twice in the opening today. You were like, it's just me. No, babe, it's not just you. Like, you're doing a good job.
Oh, thank you. I thought you meant just me. Oh, I meant it's just me doing, as opposed to Sam won't be here. I'm just sad that Sam has COVID. I feel bad for him.
I know.
I feel bad for him.
I know. I'm super bummed. Like, I saw the text yesterday and I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
But it's not like, don't do that to yourself. Like,
okay.
You're doing a
I
good
like your
job,
And
who, me or hers?
You, both of you, but I love this. See, this is why women need to be on all these shows all the time.
Yeah. Well, this is also like, I have a friend who kind of copped to me that I was like her work mom, which was like kind of cool, but also kind of like, oh yeah, I am older. But like, I'm older, so I can be like, listen, you're doing a good job. Like, don't be like that on yourself.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Jennifer.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thanks,
you guys.
Jennifer.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
All right, we're going to read some IMs and then we're going to get out of here. Illuminati Kids. I agree that Jon Stewart was probably good for the time, but the ultimate problem is he's anti-revolutionary. From McCain worship to the rally to restore sanity to his current show, he seems to think we can work all this out with civility rather than any fundamental change.
You have to graduate from these people.
Yeah. Again, but in terms of the context of what he was when he was critiquing the war at the time, that had a lot of usefulness. It's just, we now have a lot more options in terms of leftist voices than were around at that time.
And this
And the
conversation,
structure.
Yeah.
This conversation hasn't changed since everyone got embarrassed by the rally to restore sanity.
Yeah.
Which I was at.
Really?
I have a few friends that were there too.
Yeah, I went to it.
I just got depressed thinking about how Colbert has turned out.
Oh my goodness.
That's worse. You're right.
I remember at the rally, like, we couldn't hear anything. So I don't even know what they said because they didn't have the speakers situated properly. Like, it wasn't, I don't know. So I really don't remember. I just remember all the signs. It was like the first time people were making funny signs.
Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Oh my God, please get that Colorado moderate on the show. Perfect enemy in the war on smart. Oh,
Can I
yes.
please be on? Can you please make sure I'm here for that?
Yeah, we'll try to make that happen. Yes, my war on smart continues in terms of people that if they're smart and they're from these institutions, they think that they have, or I'm just, smartness is largely a social construct, except for like really stupid people like Louis Gohmert, for example. There are outliers. Tojo's bald head, is he doing an impression of the guy from Schitt's Creek? I don't watch that show.
Oh, I love that show. No, it's
we're gonna read like 5 more and then we're gonna get out of here today. A little bit early, if you guys can't tell. I got no sleep last night. I don't know why. It was just one of those nights. I gotta wean myself off of the CBD because now I'm becoming dependent on it. And then I tried to do that last night. I'm like, I'm not gonna have any, and I didn't fall asleep very well.
What do you use? It helps me sleep. I have to use it.
The tincture.
Yes.
Yes.
With the melatonin one? Yeah.
Yes. It's really great. Demian. I love how conservatives always say, let's capitalism our way out of climate change. The thing we capitalismed ourselves into. They seem to think in dystopian sci-fi like Mega City 1 and think this is fine.
Yeah, not just conservatives. Listen to our interview on weed and how we're going to address racial wealth imbalances. And the idea that we can capitalism our way out of any of these problems is silly because capitalism is based on exploitation.
Kinetic response. Disagreeing is part of being on the left. It's a feature, not a bug. It's a feature that creates progress.
No light without heat.
Yep. Don Diego. Sam, what's your secret? Your voice sounds very different when you're on TV and in other shows. For example, in Owen's video you were in a few days ago. We deserve to hear your real voice. I don't get it.
What?
Swami. Hey, Emma and MR crew. Please do take care of yourselves in light of the subway shooting in Brooklyn. I have to say, though, it is sickening to see the NYPD chief say the incident is not being investigated as an act of terrorism. Why? Weren't brown people terrorized in this weren't people terrorized in this act? Or is it because apparently only brown Muslims do terrorist attacks?
I don't know. I mean, it was a person of color who is a suspect, so I don't know if this logic even applies.
It was an earlier IM, and I haven't even seen the suspect yet. All right,
they just described him.
Eat hot chipotle chip and lie. Okay. I'll never forget how Jon Stewart said anyone not celebrating the downfall of Saddam Hussein didn't have a soul, even though anyone with half a brain knew what was coming in Iraq when the power vacuum happened. Yes, we have all critiques of some of the Jon Stewart stuff.
I don't think they were listening to what we were trying to say.
It's very simple. It's relative to what else was on TV at the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Prairie Fire Kowalski, howdy, Feminist Tuesday majority. Matt, let the ladies speak and try listening. This is a joke. In reference to the Ben Pope of the Jew Shapiro clip, flooding will only be the most noticeable and dramatic, particularly after storms. Right now, over half the grain belt in the USA is in drought. The fire outbreaks have been getting bad. You can build infrastructure to mitigate floods, but no water means no crops, and famine, mass death, migration, and disease will occur. Great points. You can't hide behind a wall when the world is on fire. Trump's failed trade war destroyed the largest grain surplus in history in less than 2 years, and due to the Russian invasion, there's no chance of rebuilding that for years, even if we had good growing conditions, which hasn't been the case for years. Leftist poggers grow gardens. And the final IM of the day, Spacco. Maybe we can't bust Jared for getting $2 billion to help MBS get away with murder, but we can bust him and his cronies for screwing up the supply chain and profiteering during the pandemic. I say we demand Jared's disastrous Project Airbridge to be investigated by the Coronavirus Crisis Subcommittee. It's headed by James Clyburn, and they have subpoena powers. That is a...
I like that.
I like that a lot. And I didn't even, the obvious pay-to-play stuff about dropping any investigation into Khashoggi or whatever. It's just it's so ridiculous. And they already had that pre-existing relationship before, so had to wait 6 months to cash in on that. Ridiculous.
The people who get involved in these deals, like what kind? I don't. You really want to make money to get involved in this kind of deal.
Especially when you already have so much.
Yeah, I'm like, and there's so many other pathways at that point to make money. Like, again, sociopaths.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, folks. We are done for the day. Thanks so much, Nomi. We will see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I get some